Mental health, preventative maintenance. Welcome to Getting a Mining Job, How Not to Have a Bad Experience, Mining 101 podcast. And in today's episode, we're going to have a look at mental health, but we're going to have a look at preemptive maintenance. So we're going to have a look at what you should be looking at your mental health when you go in. Because one of the things that there's a lot of around is there's a lot of organisations that are there to deal with people that are having problems with their mental health in the mining industry. But what I notice is that there's not a lot of information around or a lot of advice around for people going in on how to sort that out so you don't have a bad experience. So today's podcast, I'm going to talk about a few of the things that I've seen trigger people over the years, a few of the strategies that I've seen that have worked successfully that you can implement yourself going in, and so you can build yourself up to a routine that you're going to be able to survive with. So, but before I go any further, I just want to say if you are experiencing any problems or anything like that, you are actually in the mining industry and are having mental health problems because of what's going on, please don't watch any more of the video because I am going to be discussing examples and I don't want to trigger anybody. But if you are and you need some help, there's lots of places that you can go. You can Google it, and I've just Googled it and looking at all the organisations that you can reach out to, and you've got all the specific mining places like Mindset and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of organisations that deal with the stuff afterwards, but there's not a lot of information around on how you can go about sorting yourself out before you actually get a job on the mine. So I just want to put something out there that people can have a listen to, and so they can come up with a plan for themselves of how they're going to tackle it, because that's the best thing. So, all right, so I've warned everybody and I'm going to just jump straight into it. So the big thing that I've noticed over the 25 years I've been involved is the majority of the people, and including myself in this, because there was a period where I did go along and did not have a plan, and when I didn't have a plan, that's sort of the time that things fell to bits. So it's really important that you have a plan, and not just a plan for being on the mine site, so your daily work routine, but your life plan as well. So what you're doing, how long you're going to be involved in the industry, what the goals are, all that sort of stuff. You need structure, because when you've got structure, then you've got a goal, and when you've got a goal, it's much easier to keep your mental health more positive than it is negative. When it's just a bit open-ended, then that's when everything can flow, or at least that's what I found. That's what happened with me, and so that was some of the advice that I got about that. But first off, I just want to talk about being on the mine site. So one of the things that I see on Facebook constantly and other social media things is that when people get jobs, they're asking questions like, what's the food like, what's the camp like, what's the crew like, all those sort of questions. And honestly, if you're asking those questions, then there's a good chance that you're going to have an issue, because all those things can change at a drop of a hat, and there's no consistency with any of that stuff. And that's one of the best advice that I got right at the start, is especially with the 12-hour shifts and doing them end on end, so like doing a 2-in-1 roster or a 2-and-2 in a roster or something like that, where you're doing a lot of shifts in a short amount of time. So on your 2 weeks, you're doing 168 hours, is that when you're on site, you need to get yourself into a routine where it's eat, sleep, work. And then if you've got extra time and you're finding that you're coping with it, then you can add other things into it. But to add other things into it straight away and not just be concentrating on eat, sleep, work is just, it's fraught with danger, unfortunately, because, they want their pound of flesh up there. If you're doing a full 12-hour day, which everybody is supposed to be doing up there, then, if you're having a go, then you're going to do all the exercise that you need with a lot of these crew jobs, especially the underground ones around the place. If you think that you need a whole heap of gym time and all that sort of stuff, then maybe mining's not for you, because that's the other thing that I come across a lot, is that we get a lot of people, or we've had a lot of people on site that are heavily into their gym, and they try and do the 12 hours in the gym on top, and that you can't sustain that for a long period of time. People do it for a short period of time, and most of the time their work suffers, and if your work suffers and then they spot you at the gym, the bosses spot you at the gym for 2 hours afterwards, you're not going to be on site for very long, and that's the reality of the situation. But just from a eat, sleep, work reality is that you got 13 hours of the day where you're going to be getting to and from work and all that sort of stuff. Throw another hour and a half in at the start and finish of each day to eat breakfast and dinner. You've only left with a few hours to sleep anyway. So if you're going to wedge, an hour of the wet mess or 2 hours of the wet mess, or you're going to wedge 2 hours of gym in there, it's going to come at a cost to something. So what the best advice I got was to go with your routine of eat, sleep, and work. And then if you've got extra time and you think you can cope with stuff, then add it in. But go back to your core, that you're just up there to make the money. You're there's nothing else to do really. So just make sure that you get into that routine. And with that routine goes stuff like with the food, because this is the next thing that people like. Food changes a lot, guys. From one mine site to another, even internally, like the chef decides he can get a better gig somewhere, and if he's a good chef, then another site might pay a little bit more, or you can organise something to go offshore or something like that. Then you can go from having one of the best chefs on site to, around the camps, to having one of the worst. And that actually happened to me on a site. The guy that was on our site, he got offered a lot of money to go offshore, which he did. And the food, it was never the same again after that. And they lost a lot of people over it because, they just couldn't get their head around going back to an average meal. And that's another thing that I got taught at a very early age, is with the fly in, fly out, is that you need to have some staples that you can just eat continuously. I know it sounds boring and I know it sounds, repetitive, but you need to find something that they stock a lot of all the time, that you can have it end on end. And, for me, for crib, for a lot of years, it was a salami and cheese sandwich with tomato if they had it. And, I'd eat the same thing every day. And dinner was, you get a steak or the roast or whatever looked good, but if there was something that looked good, but you needed something to fall back on that you could have if nothing was good. And for me, it was the salami and cheese sandwich. So just make sure that you've got something that you can fall back on if you need to. Don't worry, the food won't be bad for long, because an army marches on its food, and there's nothing stirs people up more than poor food on a mine site. So, but you have to be ready for it. And it's just like everything else, you have to be ready for dealing with difficult people on mine sites, because they're going to exist, and you have to have a plan about that. Worrying about the facilities on site too. People worry about whether they've got a good gym or not, or whether they've got tennis courts and all that sort of stuff. If you're on the crew and you're actually, working in the mine for the 12 hours, then you probably won't see any of those facilities. Those facilities are more for the people with degrees that work in the offices that have got a bit more time on their hands. And that's fair enough, and it's good that they're there and they take advantage of it all. And, if you're doing those sort of jobs, you know that you've got the extra time on your hand to make that happen, which is all well and good, because you've got your own vehicles to get backwards and forwards to start with, and you can manage your hours a bit more than the underground crew can be, the underground crew can. But the reality of the situation is that if you finish at 6, you're probably not getting back to camp until 6:45, or 6:30 till 7, depending on how far the drive is, now if you're on the bus. And so from there, if you're going to go and spend an hour in the gym or whatever, and then have some dinner and then go from there, you've got to get up at 4 o'clock in the next morning. So again, from my perspective, the best thing to get your routine was to the eat, sleep, work routine, and to drop yourself into that. The other things that can knock you off with mental health on the mine site is dealing with relationships, and that's why you need a really good outside plan. So with your time off, with if you've got family and all that sort of stuff, so everybody knows what the plan is and everybody knows what the expectations are. The big thing that I see where people get blindsided is one person wants something different than the other person wants. And it happens all the time in relationships, just in general, but it can happen so much quicker with the fly in, fly out, with the even time rosters and all that sort of stuff. It just gets accelerated. And people do what people do, and it's not nice to say, but I did work on a crew where the fan blades got spat out through the main shaft of the extraction fan, because the extraction fan was in the side of the pit, and they smeared them all over the other side of the pit wall, and so we had no primary ventilation for the mine. So we were all sent home 2 days early, and so we're going to get home a day early or something like that. And somebody came up with a great idea with like, oh, don't tell anybody, just turn up and surprise your partner with some flowers and all that sort of stuff, and it'll be the best time you've ever had. Rah rah. I didn't have a partner at the time, and I was travelling back east to see friends and all that sort of stuff. But I turned up to the airport a week later, and two of the guys walked in on their missuses with somebody else. And so that's the reality of mining. And shit like that happens, and it might not happen to you, might happen to somebody else, but they're going to be dealing with bad mental health with that sort of stuff happening, coming back onto the crew, and that can knock your mental health as well, because then you start questioning what's going on around you and all that sort of stuff. What my point about this is that people are people, all right? So, they're going to do what they're going to do. So you just need to have a plan and to be ready for what goes on site, so you can cocoon yourself into that 12 hours of work, be professional at work, be social at dinner, back to your donga, bed, get up the next day, do it again, and then have your social time when your time's off. If you're blending that, there's nothing wrong with being mates with people on site or anything like that, but if you're forcing that blending through of being mates and not being professional and all that sort of stuff, that can be a way that it can come off the rails as well. So the big thing with mental health with mining, I find, is that people that don't have a plan, are the ones that go a cropper. You need to have a plan of what's going on and how you're going to approach it. And the other thing too is that it leaves a lot of people in its dust, especially our channel and what we do with the Australian Mining for New Starters YouTube channel is all about warning people about the failure rate for new starters and how they can correct that and how they can educate themselves. So the secret, and I haven't mentioned it yet, and I said I'd do it every episode, but the secret is teach yourself how the mine works. If you know how the mine works, then you've got something to offer the employers, because it's really easy to teach you how to drive the truck. It only takes a couple of weeks. Teaching you enough about the mine so you can be left alone to drive the truck by yourself, that's the hard bit. So if you can present to the employer already knowing that and being able to have a conversation with you, then that's how you get your job. That's the secret to getting a mining job in one of these many mines that are around Australia here, especially the hard rock underground ones. You can have a look at one of the other videos to see the training that we do, that you can get to bring your mining knowledge up to speed so you can get one of these jobs. But that's the secret. But like I was saying before, the reason that the channel exists is because they go through so many people. And when you jump into it and the biggest worry that you've got is what the food's going to be like, then my view on it is that chances are that you're not going to make it. And you're probably not going to make that 6-month mark, if at all, or a lot quicker than that. So you're not going to have time to worry about whether the food's any good or not, because you're going into it that blind to what's actually going on. The biggest issue that people have when they first get to site is that they quickly work out that they often think that getting the job is the biggest hurdle, and when they get to site they quickly realise that no, actually surviving and learning how it all works, that's the real hurdle. That's what I've got to do to make it. And they're behind the 8 ball from day one, and they don't sleep properly, they don't eat properly, they get caught up in it all. They're doing the extra days, and like I said, if you don't have that routine of eat, sleep, work, and you're throwing other stuff into it, it's easy to fall away, and it's easy to for it all to become too much. And like I tell people when I talk to them on the phone and do information calls with people, if I had $5 for every time I've seen someone put up their hand and say get me the hell out of here over the years, I would not be having to work for underground training at the moment. It's just massive. People do it all the time, and it's just because they get overwhelmed and they don't know what's going on, and it just leads and it spirals to a bad mental health outcome. So again, that's one of the reasons why we started the channel, is so people could get into it with their eyes open. That's another thing that people jump into it with both feet without knowing what's going on, and you often see written around on social media, they will train you on site, which they will, but if they train you on site, they turn over more than 50% of their new starters, and that's not one company, that's all of them, and it's just the reality of the situation. It is what it is, unfortunately. So that's what I wanted to talk about with health in mental mind, with mental health. A bit of preventative maintenance. Give yourself a plan. Know what's going on. Go into it with both eyes open. The more you know about it before you get there on day one, the better the chances are you're going to have to survive. Make sure you get your day planned for when you work. Get your staples that you're going to be able to eat all the time, that it's not going to bother you, and just get into that routine. Eat, sleep, work. Just work it. And whether you're there for 2 weeks or 1 week, you survive that, and then you go and have your week or your 2 weeks off, and you can do whatever the hell you want and socialise with whoever you want. It is what it is, and it's all about getting that into that good mental health space where you know that you're going to be able to cope with the job, and then expanding from there. I'm not saying don't go and get involved with on-site activities. What I'm saying is make sure that you've got yourself into a good routine before you expand into those areas, because if you expand too quickly and you're not coping, then it's easy to fall under the wheels and fall off the horse, as they say, and lose your job and all that sort of wonderful stuff. So it is what it is from that respect. But I just wanted people to have an understanding of some preventative maintenance that they can do before they get to site, and go in with an attitude that's going to give them a good idea of how to succeed. So that's Mining 101.